The late American writer Susan Sontag once said that to photograph is to frame, and to frame is to exclude. She was saying that as a medium, photography is and always has been subjective. However, in the digital era, there is a new and growing subjectivity in photojournalism, one that you've most likely seen but not necessarily noticed. It's called post-processing. It's when photographers digitally enhance their work to make it more captivating to the eye. The practice has raised some ethical questions within the industry, and embodying the debate is the winner of the 2013 World Press Photo Award. It shows a burial procession in Gaza last year, and it was digitally enhanced to the point that the photographer was accused of submitting an image that was in fact a composite. That clearly was not an issue for the judges, which tells you how much this industry has changed. However, the question does linger. When it comes to digital enhancement, where should photojournalists and news organizations draw the line? The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now on this year's World Press Photo Awards and the growing use of post-processing in photojournalism.
The World Press Photo's annual contest is considered the world's biggest and most prestigious competition in press photography. The aim, as the exhibition travels the globe, is to get people talking about the stories, the images, and photojournalism. This year's winning entry did all that. Some people called the photo a fake. It was taken by Swedish photographer Paul Hansen in Gaza and showed a funeral procession for members of a Palestinian family killed in an Israeli airstrike. There was something about the composition and lighting that seemed surreal. But what Hansen did was to keep superimposing the same image on itself until he achieved the desired effect.
He essentially overlaid the same picture multiple times to reveal the most detail out of both the dark and light areas, simulating the way humans can see. That's what he tried to do, and that's interesting, quite experimental, almost pioneering. The fact is that for the past 50 years we've been used to seeing photos that are a product of that chemical process, and anything that strays from that scares us.
The strength of this image is in putting together the many elements which record the tragedy of the Palestinians, the grief of the families. All this connects strongly with the viewer's emotion and empathy. But I think that the post-production is bothersome. The purpose of the photographer should be to bring the viewer in, but in this case, he's distanced.
There we get into the area of taste. How much of this enhancement do you accept? How much do you, does your editorial policy allow for? And for some, he's crossed the line. For others, he hasn't. But it's, I would say, almost impossible to draw an absolute line that can or can't be crossed. And that is an ongoing discussion.
At the center of the discussion over post-processing, the art of digitally retouching images, are photo labs like 10B Photography in Rome. This digital darkroom, as they've come to be known, does the kind of enhancing used by Paul Hansen. Founders Francesco Zazzola and Claudio Palmisano say that what they do is editorial photography. They say their work remains within the realm of photojournalism because they do enhance color, but they don't add or remove pixels from the images.
Photography, both digital and analog, creates a matrix. In the analog era, these were called negatives. In the digital era, they're called raw files. We use complex, modern, advanced instruments which can radically change an image. We use them in a journalistic context and know their limitation. We voluntarily apply limitations to the tools offered by these technologies, because journalism can only be different from simple photography through a set of ethical values.
Our method is such that we have to think about how every picture is and could be. We don't fall for the way the digital negative is automatically produced. Every time we start from scratch, that's our strength. We don't consider the starting point as more real than any other point of view. The starting point is just an automatic process by Canon or Nikon or whatever the camera brand. That's what makes us different.
But it's still volatile territory because even subtle modifications to a photograph can change our interpretation of it. For example, in 1994, during the trial of American footballer O.J. Simpson, who was accused of murdering his wife, two leading US publications, Newsweek and Time magazine, ran the same mugshot of the athlete on their front covers. However, By tweaking the color and the contrast of the image, the publications led their readers down two very different editorial lines.
The idea of crime in the US is often tied to African American communities, so by darkening his skin, they highlighted this element, his belonging to that racial group. There are ethical values set by common sense, and an application of these digital tools should be subservient to ethics and the will not to mislead or simply reinforce established stereotypes.
Keep colors as close to their original state as possible. The ethical lines seem straightforward, but when you consider that one of the most flagrant manipulations of color is to shoot in black and white, and yet we don't question the integrity of monochromatic images, the issue becomes complicated. So then the line becomes, don't manipulate the pixels, don't add or remove objects or colors. But even that line can be blurred.
After the Boston bombings, some newspapers ran images of that event, and the newspaper didn't want to offend anyone, so they removed severed limbs from the photographs. Now, I would say that either run the photo as it was or don't run the photo. I think once you get into a situation where you're pulling stuff out of an image, it's a bit worrying. Because once again, it's supposed to be photojournalism. It's supposed to be journalistic.
We've had episodes in war photos where explosions have been doubled up, the smoke was extended, the sky darkened to make everything even more shocking and grand. This attitude is in conflict with the authenticity of the photo reporter, who already takes enormous risks to be in that place and shouldn't be made to seek extra enhancements for the testimony of a situation.
Our demand for visual perfection can be traced back to fashion photography with a nip and a tuck here and an airbrush there. But photo manipulation has a long, dubious history, be it Stalin's censors removing an out-of-favor Soviet politician after his execution, or a state-owned Egyptian newspaper giving Hosni Mubarak a place of undue prominence at diplomatic talks, or Iran trying to make a missile test look more successful than it actually was. These days, though, photography has become a much more crowded and competitive place. Camera phones, citizen journalists, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we are constantly bombarded with images. Photojournalists are struggling to stand out and are pushing the limits. Ultimately, we have to remain cognizant that when looking at a picture, be it in fashion or the news, that the medium is easily manipulated.
There's a difference between the human eye and the photographic eye, which is obviously a manipulation straight away, whether you choose to shoot in colour, whether you choose to shoot in black and white. With modern digital cameras, compared to the old film cameras, you can shoot in very low light. So these are all things to take into account when actually looking at an image.
Photojournalism is about truthfulness, and you're seeing extremely bright colours. Ultimately, there's a big risk of undermining your message, and that's a fine line that the photojournalistic community has to find between attracting attention and stepping over that line and undermining your integrity.
Photography is not reality, it's a subjective medium, and for now, how it is used will always depend on who is using it, and the tools, the growing number of tools, at their disposal.